Let's go. First episode of the Game is to be Told podcast. Why am I doing a podcast? There's a billion podcasts out there. Why add one more to the pile? The goal of this podcast is to learn from interesting people from all walks of life what it is that has led to the success that they have. And to do it in a way that's not boring. I'm a salesperson. A lot of this is relatable to people that are in sales. And if you've ever listened to a sales podcast, you know pretty much all of them are boring as hell. And we're going to try to change things up a bit. My first guest is Jed Mahrle. I first met Jed when he was 17 years old. I hired him as a lead development representative at Panda Doc. Turned out to be an amazing hire really fast. He proved himself on the phone and quickly moved to a sales development representative role. And then after that, he quickly proved himself there and moved into a team lead role within my organization. And now Jed is the head of outbound sales at Mailshake. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. A lot of it is going to be about influencers because Jed is an influencer, and I kind of am as well. As corny as that sounds, Jed has thousands upon thousands of followers on LinkedIn. He has a newsletter that has over 7,000 subscribers. Why? Not because he's posting a bunch of, layups that get some quick likes. He's posting practical, actionable advice that really helps people that are trying to break into sales or have more success in sales. Without further ado, let's break right into it with Jed Mahrle. Jed, on my screen, you're just yawning, it looks like. But I think that it's recording the video. We'll hope for the best. Dude, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you being the first guest on here. And man, what I wanted to talk about is something that me and you both do, and a million other people are doing it also, which is just being a thought leader or an influencer. Some might say a guru on LinkedIn and on social media, and particular being like a sales thought leader, what it's like, kind of why we each got into it, how things are going now, and all the shit that we don't like about it. In a vague sense. We won't name any names or anything like that. But yeah, man, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, for sure. Glad to be on, man. Of course.
So first off, man, so I know, and I don't like to do like huge origin stories or anything like that, but I originally met you because you came in through Panda Doc.
Yep.
But first, before I ever hired you at Panda Doc, you did a boot camp, right? You did Praxis boot camp.
Yep.
And yeah. And you learned some social stuff through that boot camp, right? Like about LinkedIn and everything like that. Could you touch on like basically what you learned before you even started your sales career through them?
Yeah, it set me up really well for that initial SDR role at Panda Doc, because like the biggest thing that they taught me through that boot camp was how to land a job, which is just being an SDR anyways, and then the impact that having a brand has on landing a job and also being successful as a salesperson. So yeah, from the jump, they were telling us like, build your brand on LinkedIn, build your own personal website, start writing, create a newsletter, whatnot. And so all of those things helped me land the job at Panda Doc and then, excel once I got there.
So, and I feel like every time, luckily I can't see you on my end, but every time I think that you smiled. I'm probably sick of hearing it, but you got hired fairly young. You came into Panda Doc at 17. And the reason why I bring that up is that you were whipping ass right off the bat when we hired you. You were one of the few on the team that would consistently do 100 dials a day. And people would say, oh, why are you having people do 100 dials a day? We had a 20% connect rate and it was converting. The phone worked for what we were doing. And you proved that. You thought outside the box. You found new lanes through outside prospecting. You were crushing it. And most importantly, whenever I asked anything from you, you were down to go above and beyond. So when it came to like creating things that would be repeatable in your process so we could help out the other folks that are on the team, whether they're struggling or not, because you were doing better. You were one of the, hands down, the best SDRs that we had pretty quickly. In fact, we didn't hire you as an SDR. We hired you as an LDR, just kind of enriching the leads. And quickly, I realized like, all right, you sound good on the phone. Like we should dip our toe in the water. And it was pretty quickly realized like, all right, you should be an SDR. Reason why I bring all of that up is that it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that as we scaled the team and we needed a leader, that you would make the most sense, in spite of the fact that by the time you were probably 18 by then, right? So yeah. You're an adult. You could vote, if you can vote, you can lead a team. But it was obvious, like, and I never worry about age, whether you're old or whether you're young. If you're the right person for the role and it's obvious, then you need to put them into the position where they can have the largest amount of impact. And if you don't, then you run the risk of losing them. And the reason why I bring that up is that I believe during that time that you were being an SDR, and this is right when I started to get on LinkedIn, you were already doing it. By
Hmm.
no stretch am I trying to take credit, but I definitely was beating the drum about how it makes sense to be on LinkedIn. It makes sense to do LinkedIn instead of other social media because that's where the money is made. So get your social media stuff out of your system on the platform that's going to make you the most amount of money. You were doing that beforehand. You learned it at Praxis. You definitely did it as you were an SDR. When you picked things up, it seemed like you were always posting about it and people were resonating with it and you started to build a following pretty quickly. If it wasn't for that following, you would not have had leverage. And when I was pushing to get you promoted at Panda Doc, there was, and these people aren't here anymore, but there was a lot of pushback where it was like, he's wildly young to move into a leadership role. And it's like, who cares? He's the right person for the role. But that's where you were getting offers from other folks, not because you were applying, but off of the strength of what you were doing on social media, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like two, because there's two benefits to it, right? Like we sold to salespeople, so by building my brand, I was able to book more meetings. But then just by naturally sharing what I was learning, yeah, you start to get attention, and then that compounds when you're selling to salespeople who are the same people that are going to hire you. You get on everybody's radar, which is one of the big reasons why I think if you're going to land somewhere as your first SaaS role, I think try to sell to salespeople because it's the quickest way to build your network as fast as possible. But yeah, you're completely right. That's what happened.
Agreed. When I look at roles or stuff that I might want to do, I always skew towards are they selling to sales teams or salespeople because that's the content that I make. It's the content that you make, so you already have a built-in network that you can sell
Yep.
into. And that was great about Panadoc is that and I think people fall into this trap where they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to start posting on social media, and every post that they make is an ad for the company that they're at.
Yeah.
No one's checking for them. Like very quickly they get tuned out and people aren't paying attention, and when they make a post no one cares because they know that it's self-serving. They're not providing any value. My tactic back then was to post informative stuff, be as real as possible, be as honest as possible, make sure that the things that you're talking about are things that you've already tested and had success with. And once in a blue moon, not even once a week, probably every other week, I would make a post or I would share something else that was posted at Panadoc. And dude, fish would jump in the boat. Like people were like,
Yeah.
oh man, I didn't even know that you were working over there. We need digital signature and digital proposal. Can we set up a meeting? And I was tossing that stuff over to you to book or to Max or whoever to get that stuff shut down. And dude, it worked incredibly well. So that is one thing. Like I think when it comes to like the social media side of things and when you're building your brand up is
Yeah.
how is that going to help you earn an income? If you're selling warehouse software, for example, uh, is a lot of content about how to sell and how to do social selling and tech sales tips. Is that going to help you make any money on that side of the ball? Not really. It's probably not. In reality, you probably want your tips to be a little bit more and your content to be a little bit more catered to the industry that you're selling in. Is it going to resonate with your ideal prospect? And if not, I mean, I 100% agree with you, man. You're kind of you're wasting your time in reality.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's interesting. What I interviewed somebody else. It hasn't came out yet, and I always talk about like the three keys to success, in my opinion, are work ethic, student mentality, and being able to maintain a positive attitude. If you do those things, you're going to have success. And what he said was he didn't. When I asked him about what made him successful, he said consistency. And it's
Mm.
funny, like I kind of don't ever say that, but I think that's actually it's almost more important than work ethic. Like people can have work ethic, but it's kind of temporary, Like they can run a sprint,
Yeah.
but then like they're on the couch for another week after that, and they're not consistently doing it. They're not consistently posting. Man, like running a business and trying to do TikToks and stuff, I even struggle with consistently doing that. I think that's a big part of how you had success. I guess the question is, how do you stay consistent creating content that is new and that's informative to salespeople? There's really only so much stuff that you can say, right? And
Yeah.
full time job at the same time.
No, I love that. You have to get really efficient with your time. So first off, is it's not like overstretching yourself. So like from the jump, I was doing weekly newsletters, and then I realized that's too much. So I switched to biweekly newsletters. And I was like, this is the perfect amount. I'm not going to fall under. If it's monthly, whatever it is, just like have some sort of consistency. And my newsletter, it's got like 7,000 subscribers now, but it took 3.5 years to get there. And it was just due to like short consistency. But the way you actually do that on top of everything else you're doing, whether it's TikTok, LinkedIn, newsletters, whatnot, is you just combine efforts. So whenever I'd have a one-on-one with an SDR and I teach them something new and they'd have that like light bulb moment, I would just document that, like, oh, this was something that struck a chord with one of my SDRs. Let me write that down. And then at the end of the week, I have one block a week where I write all of my LinkedIn content for the week. I'm not writing a new post every day. I'm sitting down and getting it all done at once. And I just go back over those notes from all the stuff I learned, all the stuff I taught, and I create content out of that. And it also forces you to always be learning something new. Just like you said, one of the three keys to success. If you're consistently sticking to a schedule, you're forced to always learn something new so that you have something new to share.
It's fire, man. It's funny. I was gonna do a TikTok about this. It's kind of interesting. Like when you see the sales influencers that are online, and I was going to compare it to the gym influencers, right? Because there's a big difference there. I can tell whether a gym influencer is the real deal right off the bat by looking at them. I know whether or not they're putting the work in the gym just by their appearance right off the bat. And you could say, oh, well, they could be on PEDs. You still got to put the work in. Regardless,
Yeah.
you have to put a boatload of work in, and you have to know some serious things that are probably repeatable that'll lead to some success, whether or not you're doing extracurriculars to get to it. But sales influencers, I mean, dude, the last tech sales job that I had was over a year ago. Technically, Salesorg.io is training for tech sales and it's recruiting, and my wife handles all of the recruiting side of it. So, like what you're doing, I feel like is a lot more successful and has a lot more proclivity to remain successful than what I'm doing. And it's part of the reason why I decided that, like, hey, I need to work somewhere full time and put everything I have into it. And I might not even go in somewhere as a director with the way the market is right now. I might go in somewhere as an account executive. And I kind of like that idea, man, because then it's like, man, if I can easily post tips for SDRs, it's a simpler job than the AE side.
Yeah.
But the last time I was an AE was years ago. So like I was supposed to do a course on AEs and I've delayed it because it's like, how relatable is this going to be when I'm plucking out information and best practices that led me to have a lot of success, but years ago, and you do tend to forget the shit you're doing that leads to success. So there is something to that. And I see, like, it's funny, I did it at the same time as everybody else, and I kind of wish that I hadn't. And I wish that I'd stuck with it and stayed in tech sales full time. It's why I'm gonna continue to do that. I'm gonna break back in for sure, because I do notice a lot of folks fall into that trap of like, oh shit, I got a following of 5,000 people. I'm a solopreneur now. I'm gonna work under my own banner, and that's what I'm going to do. And then it's like, all right, and then the tips start to wane. You notice that they post less often because now they're running their own business. They're more worried about that. I've done the exact same thing. And I do think that you want to consider the source of it. Like, what are they doing right now? Where, like, when you're posting something, I did notice that, and I actually wanted to bring that up. Like, when you post stuff, it's not like, here's something that led to my success. No, it's like, hey, we tried this shit last week, and it worked.
Yeah.
There's such a giant difference between that and stuff that is a lot more like not even anecdotal. It's stuff from forever ago. And I think I have the benefit of like having a lot of experience of talking and of making content back in my my prior life that has helped a bit. But I think the most actionable advice comes from the people that are taking the most action at the end of the day. And that's where I would say when it comes to the influencer side of things, and we can kind of segue into like the things that I like and I don't like about the sales influencer culture, and what you may like or not like, is you want to consider the source. And it is factual that the further that they are removed from the job that they are providing the tips for, more than likely, the less actionable and the less relevant that advice is. So it is like, I know everyone's dream is like, I want to work for myself. Lord knows it's my dream too. But if what you're working on is helping people that want to break into a particular industry, you don't want to remove yourself whatsoever from that industry. In fact, you probably want to be more involved in it. I think that's something, man, that I think you've done really well. And be able to have something like, you know, the newsletter. I mean, it is technically a side hustle, right? You earn something off of it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's part of the interesting thing too, is like just from the newsletters, and now it's wild, man. Like all these SaaS companies that will sponsor, like if you build a podcast, you build a newsletter. There's lots of SaaS companies that want to sponsor that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Jed, I know what you mean. As a matter of fact, this podcast episode that you just said that on is sponsored by Salesorg.io. Are you trying to break into tech sales? Well, Salesorg.io provides you with a full tech sales course to enable you to be able to do that without having to spend ungodly amounts of money. Jed even mentions on this episode of the podcast part of the reason why he was able to break into tech sales at such a young age. Jed broke in at 17 years old is because he took a boot camp ahead of time. He was already prepared. He knew what to expect on a different level compared to all of the other people that were his peers at the time, so he was able to hit the ground running. Now Jed's the head of outbound sales at Mailshake in his early 20s. So why doesn't everyone do a boot camp? Well, because they can be expensive. They can cost hundreds of dollars, usually thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. What do we charge at Salesorg.io? Nowhere close to that. We charge $50. That's it. Why do we charge such a low amount? I want to help as many people as possible. I don't want to have these huge barrier to entries. Frankly, it helps me sleep at night. I know that I can sell the course for a higher amount than what we charge, but that's not the goal. The goal is to pay it forward because I had a hard time trying to break into tech sales. It took me 7 or 8 years of car sales and door-to-door sales and learning from my failures and not making much money in the meantime to be able to eventually have the experience that would help me break into tech sales. I don't want you to have to go through that. I don't want the people that you know to have to go through that, and that's why we charge the amount that we do. It's enough to keep the lights on for the technology that we need to run the course, and that's it. So if you're looking to break into tech sales, we do it better than anybody else in terms of the course, and we absolutely do it at the lowest possible price. If you're a company that's looking to hire, we handle that as well. All of our graduates, we obviously place through our partners, and if you want to become a partner as well, we can provide you with some of the best possible candidates out there. If you're looking for people that aren't entry level, we handle that as well. Account executives, directors, VPs, whatever you need, we take care of. And same concept, where you would normally have to pay a wildly crazy amount of money, 5 figures per hire, we don't charge anywhere close to that. So if you're interested in hiring salespeople and scaling your team or breaking into tech sales, head over to Salesorg.io. Now let's get back to that podcast.
And so there's a lot of money in the game, and it's like super tempting to want to go out on your own. I feel like in your situation though, like you've like really walked that walk for a while. You know what I mean? So like it makes sense. But for someone like me, where I'm still early in my career, and like I built my whole brand based off of just like sharing the stuff I was testing out, I feel like there definitely needs to be a good amount of time put in before like you kind of take that step out. But yeah, no, like it's all about considering your sources, because like LinkedIn's super addicting, and I've like as an SDR, like when you're struggling, you're just looking for that next tip to try to like do your job better. But you have to consider like, okay, are they an enterprise or is it SMB? Is it like a super large company or is it a small startup with no name recognition? Like there's so many variables you have to consider. And so it's best to just learn the fundamentals and then have some room for testing these little tactics that you see.
I like that you brought that up, man, because that's one thing that I probably hate the most out of a lot of the content that I see on LinkedIn, and I've hated it for probably 4 or 5 years that I've seen on LinkedIn, which is, hey, you guys that are doing this tactic, you're idiots. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You should do this tactic. This is the only tactic that works. And then you look at their job history and they've worked at one place. Dude, get the fuck out of here. Like, you have no clue what works. You know what works for your one place. I've worked, dude, I couldn't tell you how many sales places I've worked at. And the one thing that I know is that you take all of the information and all of the tactics, strategies that work, the things that you've executed on that have led to success, and you realize pretty quickly that not all of it is going to work at the next place. So you have to come in like a clean slate. And here's the other thing that's interesting when people give this type of advice is that you may be right and wrong at the same time. You might say, man, you shouldn't be doing that. This works. And they're right. It does work, and it would work better for those people. But guess what? They might have a manager that says you can't do that here. So it's completely irrelevant to them based on the structure of the team that they have. I mean, how many times when we were working together did we have a plan that we knew was going to knock the cover off the ball, and then upper leadership is like, no, you can't do that though. And then, I mean, we did it anyways, you know, but like that's a good example of like, dude, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And you also have to consider the fact that the folks that are working for a company where they're not the boss, they may not get to pick their strategy.
Yeah.
They may not get to pick how they're executing on it. So for someone on LinkedIn, and I know why they do it, because sales is a transference of certainty. So if you don't come off like
Hmm.
you're the end all be all, then people might, I think they worry that people might think that they don't know what they're saying. So they come off almost ultra confident. But what it does is make people think that whatever they're already doing doesn't work. And they have to do this one thing that works, and because they can't, that can lead to people being frustrated. That's why when I try to do any kind of like sales tips or advice or anything, I try to keep it as foundational as possible. I try to keep it as something like you could probably apply this shit anywhere. It's not just, at the particular job that I'm working at the time. Probably do it at any place. I don't know. Have you noticed that too? Where like it's like you have to do this and nothing else works, or they're quick to, or it's not even advice. They're just shitting on a
Yeah.
tactic, but then they don't even have the follow up of like, well, here's what you actually should be doing instead. Instead, people found out that it's like, oh, I could just throw shade on something that it's popular to not like, and then I'll leave it at that, and I'll collect my likes and move on.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and I think people are catching on to that though. Like, I don't know how much longer that will last. If you're like, because people are calling it out on LinkedIn, and it's just kind of like a really cheap way to create content. I think for me, I've always felt safe in just posting, saying, "Here's what's working. This is not the way to do it. This is a way to do it." And if you have that sort of like mentality where you're just sharing, "Hey, here's what I'm learning," not like this is the expert perspective, then you can really do no wrong. Because if somebody doesn't like it, it's like screw it. This is just my perspective, and like, yeah, you can really do no wrong. Like there's a perfect example of this. I made a post today talking about there's this trend on LinkedIn of sending a one word email called thoughts question mark, where it's like you're bumping your initial cold email and just sending thoughts. And Will Allred, obviously you know him, big cold email guy.
Yeah.
He made a whole LinkedIn post talking about how the thoughts bump is not a good email to send, a completely different strategy to it. And then another guy, Kyle Coleman, and these are two people I respect, and this is not throwing shade at either of them, but he made an argument saying why you should use the thoughts bump, right? And so these are two widely respected people who have been in the game a long time talking about opposite ends of like the same type of strategy. And like they're both saying different things. You know what I mean? So it just kind of goes to show that you really need to have a strong filter when you're taking advice.
Agreed. I have an example of the exact same thing on the cold call side of things, on the cold call openers side, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you will have people that say, dude, highly respected people that say, stop calling and saying, hey, this is Troy with Salesorg.io. How you doing today? Like, you should not be saying, how are you doing today? They're not interested in that or whatever. And it's like, all right, well, first off, it's a pleasantry. But it was interesting to be like, it doesn't work. Don't do it. It doesn't work. So this is about a year ago. I don't know if you know Monty Joe, who's on TikTok, but he posted and he was like, "Here's what I do." And Gong, I think it was Gong, might have been a different one of them, but they did a study, and this is the one. This is the opener that had the most success out of like 20,000 calls that they looked up, and it was, "How are you doing today?" That was it. It worked. So all of the when it comes to any advice that you get from an influencer, the key is test it. You don't jump all in with any piece of advice that you get from anybody. You test it and you see whether or not it works for the situation that you're in. Because like in our course at Salesorg, I don't just say, no, you just have to do the pleasantry opener. How you doing today? You can do that. You can do the Jed Mahrle approach, at least back in the day, which was referencing the email that you already sent, calling in reference to an email that I sent you a couple of days ago. I don't know if you saw it. Or the permission based, where it's like, hey, I'll be honest with you, this is a cold call. If you have 30 seconds, I'll explain how we're helping out people like you. And if it doesn't make sense, you can hang up. How's that sound? All of those work. And the key is to me, like, which one works the best? Well, the one that works the best is the one that you're more bought into, because sales is absolutely a transference of certainty. It's a transference of emotion. It's a transference of everything. If you had a shitty morning and then you get on the phone, if you don't check yourself, you're going to
Yeah.
transfer that. So if you say, how you doing today? And then you see somebody on LinkedIn that's shitting on it. And then you're like, man, I don't know if I should do that anymore. And then you get on the phone, I bet you it doesn't sound as good as it did yesterday before you were second guessing yourself. And that's another thing that I personally don't like about wherever, whether it be Gong or somewhere else. We tested 20,000 calls. This one has the most success. All right, who'd you test? Like,
Yeah.
how dog shit are those salespeople that you tested? Because the strategy is one thing, but how is the strategy being delivered? Hey, this is Troy with Salesorg.io. How are you doing today? All right. That's
Right.
not going to do as well as, hey, man, it's Troy with Salesorg.io. How you doing today? Way higher chance that I'm going to get a positive response there. So the data is wildly skewed based on the tone, the tonality, the charisma, the delivery, the volume that comes from that person. And it's on email, I think those tests are a little more valid because you don't have all of that additional stuff that I just said. So that is one thing that's cool about email is that it is what it is. You can't improve your delivery on your email. You know what I mean? I mean, you can improve it getting delivered, but you can't improve the way that it's presented. But it is what it is. It's text.
Yeah, there's so much missing context. I think like it's best in my like this is what I did too. I found a couple creators that I really liked and just respected, and I knew that they had like the best intentions when they were creating content. That was like Justin Michael and Patrick Joyce, and I would just listen to the stuff they were saying and test that out. Like just find somebody who like has experience in a similar lane selling a similar product and just follow their advice. You still want to test it, right? It's not going to be exact, but find the closest person to you who's kind of walked those steps before you and go off of that. You know what I mean? That's what I would do.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing is like, when you see something and it seems like it might be cool, first off, any
Mhm.
influencer that tells you that something doesn't work anymore, that hasn't worked at your job that day is wrong. They have no
Right.
clue whether or not it's going to work for you or not. And there's so many different types of sales. People would be like, you need to ask more questions. Stop selling so much. You've never gone door to door. How many questions you asking? You got to pitch. You got to get in there and start pitching. Yeah, you will ask some questions along the way, but no, and oh, you don't want to come off as salesy. All right, well, what about when you're selling a product that is you're supposed to generate some excitement when you're selling it? Like if you're selling cars, all right, you don't want to come off as salesy. Yes, I mean you kind of do. You got to build some excitement. You have to make some statements
Yeah.
about the vehicle. So there's a million different ways to sell. So long story short, when you get advice from an influencer, first off, if they tell you something doesn't work, they're almost always wrong. They don't work where you work. They don't know. If so they better be providing an alternative. They better not just be shitting on something. And that alternative is never the gospel. Test it. Dip a toe in the water before you really say, all right, this is all that we're doing now. You want to make sure that whether or not, that's going to work where you're at. And the big thing is when you're testing something, during the test, when you're delivering on that strategy, you do want to put everything you have into it when you're testing it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean put your entire day into it, but if you say, all right, 10 calls, I'm going to try this, put everything you have into it for those 10 calls. Because if not, and if you're second guessing it and you're not confident about it, then your data is going to be skewed in terms of how much success you're going to have. And the other thing to keep in mind is that while you're testing, you probably want to test it fairly long term, because the more that you test something, the better that you're going to get at it. And you're not going to get the best data that you can until you've developed a bit of a rhythm in what you're doing. So there's a lot to it. You can't just hop onto LinkedIn, get a piece of advice, and immediately implement it, and then you're going to have the most success possible. It may not work as well where you're at, and it's going to take some time for you to be able to do it at a high level usually. And I think that is where email stuff is kind of hot from a like an
Mhm.
influencer standpoint or a tip standpoint, because that's a lot more universal in
Yeah.
whether or not it works. If it worked for one, it probably is going to work for most. But like you were just saying, man, like that thoughts thing. I got a thoughts one earlier today and I replied to it because I looked and they had emailed. I can tell you the exact situation. They cold emailed me twice about supplemental sales teams that'll help prospect and help develop clients for me. And you can imagine, based on my approach, Jed, I got the first email and I got the second one that said thoughts. No call in between. My number's advertised on LinkedIn. You can easily find it. No problem. Easy to get a hold of me. Easy. I connect with everyone. No social approach. So you emailed me twice and you didn't even try to call me. And had you called me, I would have been interested. And why would
Yeah.
I be interested? Because you're offering outsourced sales. I can send a goddamn email myself for free. I don't need.
Yeah.
So what do you offer me? You're offering me nothing. You're doing nothing for me. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I wanted to. I think I did reply to him, and I said it nice. I was like, I appreciate it. I liked your first email, but you never called me, and I can already send email. Had you called me, I probably would have been more interested. I wish you the best. And that is something as a sales leader that's interesting when you try to give people advice about their job. No one wants to hear that, so I try not
Yeah.
to. I just try to be respectful about it, but I didn't feel like I was giving them advice on how to do their job. I felt like I was just saying, look, this is how you could have got me, but you didn't. So I wish you the best.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take that. We've all had those, like selling to salespeople. I remember at Panda Doc when I was an SDR, I had one sales guy send me like a full 3-paragraph essay on everything I did wrong and how I could have done better. And it's like, you appreciate the advice, but sometimes it's like, I didn't ask for it, but kind of comes with it.
Facts. Let me ask you this, because you obviously you have a prominent presence online. Do you have people cold call you and then ask you how they did because they know who you are?
Oh yeah, yeah, and on email as well all the time.
I actually like that. Those are like the hottest ones. I
Yeah,
got that
'cause
from a
email will
guy at
take it.
Seamless, which Seamless is my favorite cold calling company. I've bought them numerous times. Every time I get a call from them, it's fire. I like
Yeah,
that a lot. But I remember, man, I can't remember his name. I remember my AE's name was Dominic, but I forget the guy that set it up. But he said exactly that. He was like, "How'd I do?" And I broke it down a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, they already know what they're doing, so they did pretty well. It is a cool tactic, though, if you think about it. I don't think it was a tactic when he did it, but like, I felt more invested in that person because they cared about my opinion. You know what I mean?
I mean, why would you
Maybe
not?
there's
Yeah,
something
some
to
of the
that.
salespeople.
Maybe there's something to that for anybody, whether or not they have a big online presence. If you're cold calling a VP of sales and you get to the end, you can say, "Hey, man, I mean, I've been doing this for 3 months. You got any tips for me based on my call?" I
Yeah.
guarantee there's a higher chance that you could move the ball down the field in the future if you did that on calls with sales personas. You absolutely can extend the conversation more. You're getting more on equal level. You're showing that you respect their opinion. I wonder if that is a tactic. I don't think that it is, but it probably should be.
I mean, one of the SDRs on my team, it's not because she does that. I don't know if she does it as a tactic, but she's always asking to like, because it puts them, like, makes them feel like they're in a position of authority. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of
Yeah,
flatters their ego almost. And so you kind of get down to like the
100%.
actual person. It's a better conversation. But yeah, like
Yep.
at the end of each call, she'll ask that. She'll be like, "Hey, what could I have done better?" And she'll also ask, like, just, "Hey, I saw you used to work at," like, if she called you, she would say, "Hey, I saw you used to work at Panda Doc. Is there anybody else at Panda Doc that maybe this is a better fit for?" Like, those are two things at the end of your cold calls that I think if you sell to salespeople, especially, there's no reason not to do it.
Yeah, I used to. I like the who do you know? Absolutely can work.
Like, why
Like,
not?
hey, I was calling because we do this, this, and this. I don't know if you guys are in the market, but do you know anyone that might be? And sometimes you'll just get, well, yeah, me. Or sometimes at the very least you probably get a little bit more of a conversation than just getting a flat no. I like the idea. I like open-ended questions like that get them to talk where you're not going to get a yes or a no. I obviously love the option close. It's probably my favorite for sure. I don't beat the drum on that too much online because everyone makes a big deal about how like you need to you have to play the 100 question game when you're cold calling. It's like, well, yeah, in some things, when you're doing like a complex sale or something like that, you may need to do that to qualify it up front. But the example I give, it's like, Fleetmatics, it was GPS tracking. If I call a plumbing company that has 10 vehicles, I know they need to keep track of their guys. I already know that ahead of time. So I need to tell them how it helps. I'll ask them a question, maybe a qualifying question, and after that, I'm going for the close. When I
Yeah.
go for the close, I'm doing an option close. And like, to me, that's the best route. I don't like asking specifics. I like giving them the time, and I like to funnel it through the option close. How do you guys close on the appointment over at Mailshake?
Oh, the option close, of course. It's always
It's
been a
fun.
staple for all my teams. I mean, I I think it's a no brainer, right? Like, why would you not? It's just a better way to close your calls or go for the appointment. And something you said that always stuck with me too on that same note, which was like, you said how much, like, track how many times in the day you actually ask for the meeting, right? Because if you're not getting appointments, how many times did you actually ask for it? And then it just becomes a game, right? So like every now and then, like with my SDR team, we'll be like, okay, let's just see who can say the option close the most times today. Because if you just focus on that, which is something controllable, then the rest is
Yep.
going to fall in place over time, which is getting a meeting.
And I know that, like, I feel like there's a lot of people, particularly on LinkedIn, that if I beat that drum as hard as I really want to, that they'd be like, this is not what I like about sales. This is everything that's wrong with sales. You're saying to go for the close before you've earned it, like, et cetera, et cetera. Dude, I don't care until somebody proves me wrong. And anytime that I work at a place and I do this, it works every time. It's worked for the
Yeah.
past decade. Whoever says the option close the most time in the day almost always wins the game, because you cannot book something if you don't ask for the meeting. So it's like, yeah, man, I had a million great conversations. And it is interesting. Like I always tell people, track the amount of times that you go for the close throughout the day. Because you could get to the end of the day and be like, man, I had some really good conversations. Talk to somebody for 10 minutes, talk to another one for 15. There might be some interest there. All right, cool. How many times you asked for the meeting in the day? None. Or once. And it's like, all right, how many people you talked to today? I got a hold of 5 people. All right, so you got a hold of 5 people and you didn't go for the close on any of them. Well, let me ask you this. If you got a hold of all 5 of those people and you tried, do you think you might have got one? Do you think you might have a 20% closing percentage if you asked for the meeting? Probably is the reality. If you know the industry that you're calling into, you have a pretty good idea that they share a lot of the same problems. And if they do, then in my opinion, you've already earned the right to go for the close ahead of time. And the worst thing that can happen if you go for the close is they say no. And then you just keep it moving. I would rather shoot first and get a no that I have to overcome than build my way up with 1,000 questions and then maybe not even be able to get to the close because I've been on the phone for too long. You know, that's always how I've looked at it, man. Is like the option close is a swing of the bat. So if you're playing baseball and you're standing in the batter's box and they're throwing the pitches at you, if you don't go for the close, it's like you just held the bat and you just watch the pitches go by and you strike out. You gotta. So there's no strikes in sales. You can swing that bat as many times as you want in the day. So why aren't you? Why aren't you swinging the bat as many times as physically possible? And you'd be shocked at how often, if you go for the close, how much success you're going to have. You know, that's one that I don't care what any other influencer has to say. That I feel like will be the case forever. Whoever asks for the most meetings usually gets the most meetings because of a few different things. Number one, you can't get one if you don't ask for it. But number two, the more that you ask for the meeting with someone on the phone, the better that you get at asking for the meeting. I call it in my course compounding sales growth. It's like compounding interest, right? You're leveling up because the more times that you say it, the more that you're probably going to book. The more meetings that you ask for, the more meetings you're probably going to get. But also, the more meetings that you ask for, the better you get at asking for the meeting. So LOA, your law of averages, say that you're going to book more, but at the same time, your conversion rate goes up while you're booking more. So now maybe if you had a 20%, you get 1 out of 5, you keep doing it, maybe you go to a 40%. And if you continue to do that amount of times and you continue to level up your conversion rate, eventually you can't be touched. You're gonna crush it. You know, and I've never seen that not be the case, man, with sales developers. And I know like it's big to ask all the questions and everything like that, and that's cool and it can help you. And I can see where it's definitely important, but man, at the same time, whoever goes for the meeting the most times is going to book the most of them. You know, way more than 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I think it's better for the prospect too, because nobody wants to be called, interrupted, and then talked to for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate somebody that cold calls me, gets right to the point, and then asks the question that they intended to ask from the very beginning. And so, like, you appreciate that, right? And so I think the key is having a good pitch that's relevant, and then asking maybe 1 pointed question, 2 questions, and then going for the close. And if they want to stay on the phone with you, you know, they'll give you an objection. You can keep answering questions. But yeah, I think the whole thing is like it's better for the prospect anyways, because you're respecting their time.
That is what's funny that I see a lot from influencers like on LinkedIn is they'll be like, you're stop pitching. Dude, get the out of my face with stop pitching. Continue to pitch. Because if you call me and you've got 5 questions for me before you tell me why you're calling, I hate you. I do not want to talk to you. I don't want to buy from you. You've wasted my time. Hit me with a 15 to 20 second pitch of what you do, then ask a question. I want to know why you're calling me and whether or not it's worth my time ahead of time. So they're always, it's like, oh, it's disrespectful to just get on the phone and pitch somebody. No, I feel like it's the opposite. Exactly to your point. I think it's disrespectful when you get on the line and think that you can just ask the questions of somebody and get information from them before you've earned their interest and attention. It is so funny how people think that like, oh no, you should stop making so many statements. And I think that part of the reason why people say that is that when you give people advice on how to make statements, there's a lot higher chance of it not working than asking questions. Because if you ask questions and the people say that F off and everything like that, then it's like, oh, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I just asked questions about their business. And it's like, no, you did. You did something wrong. You didn't earn the right to ask all those questions yet. Pitch. Give them an idea what you're doing, how you're helping out people that are like them. You know, and dude, my pitch has not changed much
from 10 years ago to today, and it still works. You leverage social proof. You can change the wording, but hey, I work with somebody down the road from you guys, or I work with so-and-so that's in y'all's industry, and we help them out with this. And usually if I'm helping out somebody else that's in the same industry, there's a chance that I might be able to help you if you guys ran into those problems as well. It's not rocket science, dude. The social proof reduces a little bit of skepticism because cold calling is reducing skepticism before you can build impulse and intent. And then you ask a question, a relevant question, and the more poignant and relevant that it can be, the higher likelihood you're going to be met with a decent response. But a lot of it isn't the words that you're saying, it's how you're saying it.
Yeah.
Do you sound like someone they'd actually want to talk to? Do you sound like you're reading a script or like you're a robot that's a telemarketer? Or do you sound conversational and relatable? That's way more important to me. And it is funny though, man. That absolutely bugs me where it's like, are you guys still pitching when you guys are cold calling? Yeah, I am. And I'm never going to stop. I'm still pitching. I'm going to continue to pitch because I respect people's time. If they're not interested in what I'm offering, that's fine, but I'm going to offer it to them. You know, what dog shit product are you selling where you can't tell them what you're doing before asking the questions? That makes me think that your product is bad. If you can't tell me right off the bat a couple of things that it might help me with and it doesn't generate interest for me, then that means that you're the one that's actually being deceptive by trying to ask all of these extra questions to be able to find something that you can exploit.
Yeah. And I think what you said too is like, I think the reason why people focus so much on questions and building these elaborate cold call scripts is because working on your tone, in my opinion, is the hardest thing to work on. Like having a good effective tone. And if you just had that, then you don't have to do this elaborate cold call scheme. Like you remember Brian, he would sell yachts and he was an SDR.
Dude, of course I remember him. I still talk to him. Yeah, Brian
of course.
Anderson, he's the man.
Yeah, he was I'm so glad I got to work next to him when I first started as an SDR because he didn't have some sort of elaborate script. He just had the best tone. He was so confident in what he sold that he would just call you and you're not getting off the phone unless you hang up or take a meeting. And that was just his, because he just had the best tone. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Dude,
I think that's
they hate that works. That's
Yeah.
a fact, dude. These gurus are gonna hate it. Shout out your boy. Was it Jesse Willett? Gurus are gonna hate that, dude. But it is, yeah. Like he was. So what was I could tell you his interview role play. I could tell you exactly how it went. I remember it to this day. So he's called me once because that was the role play. And back then we had personas that you would get to pick or that we would say that we are. And they were at Panda Doc, they were celebrities. So it was like Barack Obama, Britney Spears, and it was like a couple other ones. So Anna, who was one of the managers over there at the time, she was doing it. And she was like, I'm going to be Britney Spears. And like right off the bat, when he was talking, he was like, is this Britney Spears? She was like, yeah. He was like, all right, well, hopefully this isn't too toxic for you. And like, or some kind of like icebreaker, like related to Britney Spears. And I was already like, all right, I like this guy. I like, and he just sounded confident, not abrasive, not aggressive, but he definitely sounded confident. He sounded like someone that I want to talk to because he was bringing some energy on the call. And you're exactly right. It's hard to do that so people don't provide advice for it. Right? Because people, and I do think that's also where email advice actually gets a lot better responses and gets a lot more engagement because it's so easy. Hey, try this. All right, cool. So I don't have to really work on anything. I can hit copy and paste. Yeah. And I've got my email. You know, when you want a cold call, they say cold calling is dead. It ain't dead, but it takes dedication. It takes a lot of dedication. So here's a question for you, man, because I usually reach to you when I need help with email stuff because when I was an SDR, I didn't email anyone. We never did. We only used the phone back then. And obviously you're crushing it on the email side. So to this day, and I will continue to bug you about email stuff. So on the cold calling side though, what do you do with your reps to improve their tone? Like how do you work with them on the tone and the tonality and the volume and all that?
Yeah, so one is just having consistent role plays. So we have 3 role play calls every week. But like specifically, one of the biggest things too is like learning when and how to use up and down tones. So like one thing I've noticed too is like people who speak confidently tend to have more of like a down tone, right? If I speak to you and I have like I'm speaking more assertively, my tone of voice is going to go down. Whereas if I'm speaking to you and I'm like really excited, my tone goes up in kind of high pitch, right? And so we'll focus on little things like that, where it's like try to avoid your tone of voice just going up and up and up in high pitch, because that is going to trigger off alarms of like, oh, this person is maybe on the side of like overly confident, right? So like little things like that where we're tweaking specifics about their tone of voice, but it's really just practice and then listening back to your calls. So like once a week, we're listening to calls together. We're role playing consistently. And then another thing too is like, just trying to get them in the mindset of like, hey, how do you talk to your friend? Like, how would you talk to your friend about whatever it is you're selling? Because typically that puts you in a more of like a relaxed state, right? Like you're more used to having those conversations. So you're not worrying about all these extra things or what the other person thinks about. So I always try to give that advice is like, hey, talk to them like you're talking to your friend. And you're going to sound a lot more relaxed and confident in your tone. But there's really no secret to it other than just, like you said, dedication and practice, because that's the only way you're going to actually learn it. It just has to be stuck. Like that pitch, you have to say the pitch so many times that it doesn't even, it's just stuck in your head. You know what I mean? You're just saying it without even thinking.
So there's a few things that you can do that I think help depending on what people need the most help with. So and I'm sure that I'm not coming with some new inventive strategy here. I'm sure this has been done in the past and there's probably a word for it. But what I say is like, it's stretching your comfort zone in whatever is the element that you're working on when it comes to like your tone or your volume. So for example, if you're somebody that sounds like you're reading a script and your volume is incredibly low, like it is obviously too low, you sound unconfident. What I'll say to them is like, all right, try the pitch 10 times and yell it as loud as you can.
Yeah.
Like go way overboard on your volume. And then once you've done that, I want you to, instead of having it at a 10, I want you to rein it down to about a 5. I want it to be louder than you were before when you were just pitching, but I don't want it to be as loud as we were screaming, right? And you'll notice when they wildly stretch themselves out in their comfort zone, that when it's a lot easier for them to bring it down and then get to where they should be, as opposed to just saying to them, try to be a little louder. Like it's because once you've gone past the mark, it's easier to rein it in once you've done that. Thing that we used to do at Sidcore, this is door-to-door sales, and I hated this, dude, but it did work, is they would say, all right, we're all going to role play. You have the people go to this side of the room, half go to this side. And then at a point, they'd say, all right, you guys are going to role play with a pirate accent. And you guys are going to role play with whatever, sound like a cartoon character that they'd pick out or something like that. And dude, I hated it because I am not an extrovert by any stretch. I do extroverted things that I like, but I'm naturally introverted. I was not trying to do my Verizon sales pitch like a pirate. But when you did it, and you did it like for the 10 minutes of practice pitch, what are the chances that you're going to have a little bit more personality in your pitch when you do it regular? Pretty high. It's pretty high that you're probably going to be able to inject some more personality in there. So the key is that if there's an element to your pitch that you know is lacking, go way beyond where you want it to be to get better at it, to the point that it wouldn't even work, and then rein it in to where you want it to be. Because if you're just trying to reach that level without going beyond it, it's a lot harder to get there, I feel like.
Yeah, it reminds you of the exercise you had us do when we were in the office, which is where you would have to pitch over the other person and the first person to mess up. Like if there's any managers listening right now, I even still do this on Zoom calls. It's obviously better in the office, but we do this on Zoom calls where it's like you have two teams, and then you have people just pitch over each other at the same time. The first person to mess up is out. The next person moves on. You keep going until the last person is there. And it's just exercises like this to make you push you out of your comfort zone, try new things when it comes to your pitch, so that when you're cold calling, it actually feels much more normal. Like you feel like there's not all these additional variables when you're role playing.
Dude, yes. To me, practice pitch, your role play time during the day should be the hardest part of the day. Yeah. And the way that, the reason why I feel that way is because I came up, 15 years ago going door to door. And I can tell you the hardest door to knock when it came to going business to business, barbershops. You're when you go into a barbershop. You're going to go in, you're going to have to pitch. And there's a million dudes that are in there that are ready to pop off, that are ready to make fun of you, that are judging what you're doing when you're in there. It is tough. So when we practice, we'd be like, all right, do your pitch in front of the 40 people that we have in the room right here. And it's like, why would I do that? I'm not going to have to do that throughout the day, because you're going to have to pitch where there's 10 people in there. And if you do this way, it's going to become a lot easier for you when you get in there to sound confident, because you've already done something similar. Or like what you were saying too, so we would do pitch Olympics. So if you'd have, let's say you have 12 SDRs, you put 6 on one side, 6 on the other, and they're facing each other. And, the line goes up and then it's one-on-one facing each other. And it's like, all right, do your pitch, but not taking turns. Like you were saying, same time. And whoever stumbles loses and they're out. And then the next person comes up. And then eventually there'll only be one person left, and that's the winner. We give them a gift card or whatever, And that works so well because you will be interrupted. You're going to get interrupted throughout the day, and you're going to have to overcome that. So are you practicing beyond what you're going to have to overcome throughout the day? And if you're not, you're going to have a pretty hard time overcoming those things. It's funny. I was listening to a part of my take the other day. They were talking to JJ Watt, and they said, I know you're retired, but if there was a rule where you could play one more season of college football now that you're retired, like every college team gets to have one alumni that's previously been retired, and they can play one season. Would you do it? And he was like, hell yeah, I would. Of course I would, because I've been in the NFL getting my ass kicked for however many years. So now you're gonna go in college, and it's like it's nothing, because it's so much easier to do well at something when you've gone beyond what you need to do. And that's where, like, in sales and pretty much anything in general, just good enough, you'll never get good enough if that's what you're striving for. You got to go past it, and you have to continue to. Again, it's consistency, man, for sure. So, dude, there's one other thing about influencers that I wanted to talk to you about, man, which is you're more than a number. It's okay to fail. If you're below average, that's not a reflection of who you are and everything like that. And it's true to some respect, right? But it's also bullshit for your job, Like, let's be honest. You're at a job, man, the nicest guy, nicest gal there, doing nothing, bringing in nothing, not hitting their numbers, not hitting their activity numbers, even not even meeting their manager halfway, and they're not delivering. You're not more than your number. You're in a performance-based industry. Yeah. This is not engineering. This is not HR. This isn't even marketing. You are judged by your number, and you should be judged by your number. And if you didn't want to be judged by your number, then don't carry one. But if you decided to carry a number, we are not going to turn sales into HR. And it never will be. Trust me. And all these layoffs that have been going on, I guarantee some of the CEOs that have done those layoffs have probably made a post that said you are more than your number. And guess what? Now you are a number. You're one of the numbers of people that were laid off. Do not believe the shit that they're telling you. And here's why they're telling you that, in my opinion. You tell me how you feel about it. But it goes back to the 80-20 rule, which is the law, Pareto principle. 20% of your people are going to give you 80% of your results, right? Mm-hmm. So who are the 20%? The 20% are the ones that know that they are their number when it comes to their work day. When you leave, then you're not your number anymore. I've got 4 kids and I've got another one on the way. They don't care about my sales number. I'm more than that to them. And I'm more than that probably to the people that are in my office. But when it comes to my performance, it is my number. So why do so many people online that are thought leaders say you're more than your number? Well, because that 20%, you'll get 20% engagement if you cater to them. But that means that there's 80% of people that aren't doing well usually, that are only doing 20% of the number because of that law. And man, if I could just make a post that would make them feel warm and cuddly inside, make them feel a little bit better about how bad they're doing, I bet I would get 4 times the engagement. 80% is 4 times the size of 20%. So why don't I just post a bunch of dog shit that absolutely is not actionable, isn't helpful, is what somebody wants to hear, but isn't what they need to hear. And I bet you that I could probably build up pretty well. I bet I'll get a bunch of hand clap reactions, and I might even get 5-figure reactions on that. I bet a lot of people will follow me. And guess what? The next day, I'm going to post something else that makes them feel better. And a few months from now, I'm going to make a post about how it's okay when you get fired and what you should do next, because probably most of the people that are following me are going to get fired because I'm giving them the worst possible advice, which is, guess what? The reality is life is hard. Sales is hard. Hitting your number is hard. Being accountable to that is hard. Not beating yourself up, but having a my fault mentality about that is difficult. And difficult doesn't sell. There's a reason why they're selling 8-minute abs back in the day and not 8 months diet, because 8-minute abs sounds like it's a lot easier than the reality of what you need to get abs. It has nothing to do with how many crunches you're doing. You know, it's and that's my take on it. But I'm curious, as someone else who's active, very active on LinkedIn, like, what's your take on that, man?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have the same type of opinion. I try to stay away from those posts on LinkedIn because they don't really, like you said, it's like, what sort of value are you trying to provide? I think it's hurtful to those people because, first of all, not everyone should be in sales. You know what I mean? Like, you have to know what you signed up for, like you said. Like, you
Yep.
are, like, the downside is that you're going to be judged by your number. The upside is you'll make probably a lot more money than in any other position. And so
Yep.
the fact is, like, it's best to know that so that you can decide whether or not sales is the right position for you. And then on the other side, if you are already struggling and then you kind of give in to content like that and that makes you feel comforted, you're never going to actually succeed in your role and you're going to continue to struggle. So it's kind of just like a lose-lose when people make that type of content. Yeah, I mean, that's my perspective. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of be straight up with it. That's why we're in sales.
It is. To me, it is interesting that I feel like the people that make that content know that too, and that's, I think, where I have the biggest problem with it, is because if they're in sales and they're having success, I mean, you've got to know that in your 9 to 5, you absolutely are your number. To me, sales is no different than the NBA. It's no different from the NFL. And I know not everyone likes to make sports metaphors when it comes to sales, but it's the most closely relatable thing. It's a performance-based business.
Yeah.
If you're not performing, you're probably not going to be in the business for long. So if, like, just imagine if they're like, because I'm sure you can find a million people that are teaching people how to do well at basketball online.
Yep.
Do you think they're ever saying, hey, if your stats aren't up to par, you're more than that? It's okay. No. If you're not doing well, you need to put in the work to get better at it, or you need to probably stop playing basketball professionally or have aspirations to play it professionally. You should be doing it as a hobby. And maybe, playing against your, 10-year-old son, like me, for example, where you can still dunk on him, because you're not going to be able to play against people that are actually dedicated to it and that have a higher level of accountability.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if the point of those posts is to say, like, you should separate your work self from and not let it bleed into your self-worth, like, okay, sure, I get that, but it's like, I don't know, just at the end of the day, if you're in sales, it should teach you to have thick skin, and I think that's something you should take as a given. But I love that sports analogy. That's that's good. It's true. I use it all the time too. Like, sales is a professional sport. You should treat it like that, or at least the best sales reps do.
Yeah, man. I've said it I've been beating that drum for a good decade, that I personally believe sales is a professional sport. The only difference is that it's the only sport where they allow the amateurs to play with the professionals. That's the only difference, no matter where you work at. And that doesn't, by the way, that's not a knock to the people that are amateurs. It's just to say, man, it's actually kind of cool that you can go in as an amateur and learn from the pros, the ones that are actually already having success. You're not afforded that ability in actual professional sports. That's the big difference between the two, man. It's yeah, man, it's that's forever going to be my take, though. And it's funny, like you said, separate who you are at work from outside of it. And I think that that's fair. But I do think it might have been Alex Hermosi who said, like, the people that are the most successful usually have, like, deep-seated insecurities that they want to prove. Like, I think part of the reason why I personally had success with my personality type is that I did take my number personally.
Yeah.
I did believe that I was a reflection of my number. If I had a great month, I was on top of the world. If I had a bad month, I took it personally, and I didn't beat myself up and get depressed about it, but I was like, man, I never want that to happen again. Because it is
a healthy way to
kind of
do it, though. And that's it. Yeah.
It may not be, because it is wrapped into my self-worth. You know what I mean? Like, where it's like, man, that was me this month. I pride myself in what I can do at my job. I'm passionate about sales, and I didn't do what I wanted to do, and I'm not happy about it, because I am a reflection of my number. And I never want that to be the reflection again. When I look in the mirror at the end of the month, next month, I don't want to see this again. And I get it. It's like you shouldn't beat yourself up. But I mean, if you have a plan for how you're going to fix it and you work hard at it, you probably aren't going to have to the next month. But so it is interesting. It's the same thing as how everyone nowadays says, I'm interested. We can close on this. I'm interested for your take on this, where they always say like your workplace is not your family, right? It's like, man, do you guys not realize how bad people have it with their family sometimes? Like, for some people, like, dude, I talk to you way more than I talk to most of the members of my family. Like, so like, are we family? No. But at the same time, like, dude, almost all of my friends came from work. Almost all of them. They either came from work or they came from when I was a battle rapper, you know? So it's like, yeah, you're not going to say that because it's corny and everything like that. I don't think that you should say that your workplace is a family. But I also think that there is a reality that in the right work culture with the right people, it often, sometimes more often than not, it goes beyond you just being colleagues at those places. And those relationships matter to me more than some of the relationships that I have with my own family. Like, it's odd because I feel like that doesn't ever get called out, where it's like, well, your workplace isn't your family. It's like, well, what if someone has no family and their workplace is full of supportive people that are helping them in and outside of work? Dude, I couldn't tell you how many people that I've managed or my peers hit me up for personal advice. Has absolutely nothing to do with sale. Has to do with some of, you know, I won't name a single name or bring up what it was or what it is often, but things that are wildly personal. That and it makes me feel kind of like fulfilled a bit that I've built that relationship with those people. And I guess you could look at it like maybe you shouldn't do that in work, but I just don't agree with that. I think you build your team in blue jeans. And what that means is that you build your team, the more that you get to know somebody on a personal level, the more that you get to know what their actual whys are and the reason why they're in the business and what motivates them. And the more that they get to know you, the more that they get to respect you and potentially trust you and want to work with you. And then it doesn't feel so much like it's work. So I think that's like what the intent is with a lot of people when they say, well, we're like a family here. And it's like, no, you're not. Get the fuck out of here. You don't know whether they are or not. I could easily say that at Panda Doc, I never did, but I could easily have said we're like a family there because I rock with you and I plan to continue to for whatever. With Luke Robbing, I plan on, dude, I take his call whenever he calls. With Max, same thing. And I can name a bunch of other ones as well. And at Fleet Maddox, I could do the exact same thing, man. So there is something there. And I guess you could say, well, that's not a healthy way of working. Man, it served me pretty well. I'm pretty fulfilled with.
Yeah. I was gonna say, if you spend half your time at work, you know what I mean? Why would you not want that, right? Why would you not want to build relationships around people where you like, if that's where you spend half of your waking time, like that sounds like a pretty miserable way to spend half of your life if you don't enjoy the people you work with. I don't know. Maybe that sounds like an ignorant thing to say, but that's my perspective as well. You know?
It's not, dude. And I'll tell you what, I'll double it up. And this isn't your thoughts, but this is something that I do think of is you are generally at work more than you're at play. Like you said, half. I might be more than that in reality, depending on your commute, when you go to bed, how much time you're spending at work. It's usually half of your life or potentially more than half, depending on what you're doing. So it's like you're more than your number. All right, fair. You're more than your number for less than half of your life because the other half, you got a choice to make. Do you want to continue to lose for most of your life, or do you want to spend that time winning? I can tell you it's a lot more fun and a lot more fulfilling when you're winning. And it takes work. It takes accountability. Sometimes you might need to be hard on yourself and ask yourself the hard questions to do that. But man, the alternative is you're a loser for most of your life. And that sounds shitty. And it sounds like it's a negative mindset, but it's also reality. You know, who brought the muffins in today has no bearing on whether or not you matter in the place where you're at. They didn't hire you for that. They hired you to produce if you're in sales. And hopefully you're going to be a good culture fit and everything like that as well. But at the end of the day, I'll take a mercenary over whoever gives the best hugs, 100%, I will take, not to call him up, but I mean, I'll take 1,000,000 Luke Ruffings over one sweetheart dude who isn't hitting his number. And Luke might be a little bit more cut and dry with his approach, but man, I loved it. And it's the funny thing about those guys is that when you make the investment, like we were saying earlier, and you get to know them, you realize pretty quick that exterior there's a lot more to them than that. There's a lot more to somebody when you actually get to know them, but you have to make the investment to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. It's all like you said.
Jed, it's funny, man. This is the first one. So I was about to say that I could talk to you for hours, but the reality is I probably talked for 80% of the time. So and that's not a knock on you. It's more a knock on me. I will work on not being so wildly long-winded. I actually was worried that I wouldn't have anything to say when we hit record. So maybe I overdid it a little bit, but dude, man, you're crushing it, dude. I rely on you as a resource for a lot, and you have a lot less experience than me, but your experience is incredible, man. It's awesome to see how your career is progressing, man, and how it's developing. And I think you're a testament to when you're consistent and you've got a plan and you stick to it, there's unlimited amounts of success that you can have, man. So definitely admire that about you, man. And I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you joining.
Yeah, likewise. Appreciate it. This is a fun conversation. I think we touched on some fun topics for sure.